Hi, welcome back to the channel. This is my favourite amp. So this is the Tonemaster Deluxe Reverb amp. This amp is basically it can do everything I need it to do. A little bit about my journey. I had really horrible little amps in the 90s. My first gigging amp was a Marshall valve state AVT50, playing in blues bands and in soul bands. I got a valve state 100 watt with a 4x12 with a decent 4x12, and then early 2000s I got myself a JMP 50 head to upgrade my stack, and that was from 1977. Valve head, absolutely amazing, Marshall kind of tone, great clean sound actually, and then I just used it to put pedals in front of. It ruined the suspension of the first two cars that I owned, and I got myself a gigging combo, and I really liked the Fender sound, so I got myself a Cyber Twin, one of the first models, and I was on a tour. I got to a venue in France called Le Fletch Door, which is a wicked little venue, and we unloaded it off the van, and it had a little screen on it and it just said error. I thought, right, my amp just says error, so I had no amp, and they kindly provided me with a Vox AC30, which again had a fantastic sounding amp. Steered away from the cyber amps at the time, and I went and got myself, I took it back to PMT where I bought it from in Birmingham, and the Gaz who used to run it, he was just like, I'm really sorry, what can we do? And they'd had a second-hand Mesa Boogie in, I think it was a Rocket 44 1x12 combo, and I took that, and I was laughing then. So I'd had a Mesa Boogie. I'd gotten myself, after a while, I think that was it, I got married and I needed to sell some stuff, and I had a student who had one of those Black Star 5-watt amps, and I realised, like, even having like a 45-watt Mesa Boogie, it would rattle the tables in most venues, and most of the time I was being mic'd up, so I didn't need a loud amp. 5 watts is actually enough. It was just the headroom that I wasn't quite getting, but I got myself one of those little Black Star 5-watt valve amps, which worked great for recording with as well. And then I got myself the big, I think it was like a 60-watt HT amp. That broke. I did an album launch. I was in Bath. I think my car broke and that broke all on the same weekend. Perfect. Again, I took it back and they gave me another one. Told me to keep hold of the other one. It was alright. I don't know, I just still miss the Mesa Boogie kind of sound. Got myself another Mesa Boogie. I've got the 525, which is actually a 30-watt valve combo, but you can change the output levels on it. And maintaining that amp was a bit of a faff, and I do my own stuff on them, you know, but you need Mesa Boogie valves for Mesa Boogies, otherwise it costs a fortune. Round about the time, this was probably about 5 years ago, I needed a new roof on my house, and I've got a guitar school, so I took out a loan to get the roof done, and at the same time I bought some more amps, and I was working at a college at the same time, and we had these Boss Katanas come in for the students. Absolutely amazing amps as well, so I'd recommend Boss Katanas. I've got loads of them down in my studio, of different sizes, and the 50-watt ones, all you need really. And I've been using a Boss Katana for a long time, and then I made the move to just using boards. So I used a Vailton GP200 last year, which is really good, and then upgraded that, went for the full Helix thing, and again I just love, the Helix thing is incredible. But I do love buying little pedals and sticking them on and chopping and changing signal paths and things that goes along with everything else. And I love the sound of an amp in a room. And that's what the one thing that the Fender Deluxe does better than any kind of modeler really like that. It's just a great amp in a room. And for most of the stuff that I play, which is like your funky stuff, you know, there's a lot of chopping. Sometimes I just need a really great clean sound, and then I can use one or two pedals just to boost my signal, or just get, you know, quite a fat lead tone. And you can do that quite simply with a stomp box. You know, I've got a Helix Effects that I still use as my main kind of that does most of the lifting of my rig, but the stomp box, I just love a little stomp box that you can change out and chop and change on your board. So that works for me, and I must say this rig has been brilliant. The two things that make it great for a gigging guitar player: one, the weight. So it's dead light. It's sort of like 9 kilos or something like that. I've got a 1-year-old. It's lighter than her. And you know, you can pick it up with one hand. And when you're coming home at like 2 in the morning after a gig, I've got both my guitars in one bag. So I've got my guitar and a spare in a double case. I've got my pedal board in a bag, and I've got my amp, and I can get through the door, through the studio, and I can get it upstairs, back in the house, you know, in one trip. And that's generally the aim, you know, to when you're doing this kind of stuff as a working musician. It's doing it all in one trip without breaking your back, without feeling tired the next day. That's the goal. What else is good about it? It looks great. It looks legit. Most people think on the gigs that it is a Deluxe Reverb, so they're just like they don't even notice that it's a modeler of a, you know, a valve amp. It responds to me. It responds like one. And the best thing, and this is what the engineers like, you can just plug it in. You can have a silent stage if you want, but you just plug in a XLR around the back, and you've got your tone. I do a lot of depths for people. What some shows that I've worked on, the engineer likes to have a stereo feed. It's got a Y cable. I've bought a Y cable for about $5. You stick the Y cable in and it'll go mono to stereo. Engineers are happy, and you've got IRs on it as well, so you can make it sound like a Royer, which is a bit, for me it's a bit too lively. I like the SM57 sound, or an SM57, and the best thing about it is you can do firmware updates. So my favourite, this is what brought me here actually, when I had all the modelling stuff. So when I was using a Helix and when I was using the Vailton, I always used a Blackface Deluxe. That was my favourite amp sound, and specifically one with a bright cap mod done. So I was in the market and I was thinking, wouldn't it be good to have a real Deluxe Reverb? But then I was thinking, but then I'd have all the valves. I have 9 valves in them. So a full revalve, I mean, there's not many places that are actually doing valves anymore, but a full revalve would be, you know, like getting your car serviced. And then I'd want the bright cap to be done. And a lot of the reissues are on PCBs. They're not very easy to actually do the bright cap. So, you know, and the hand wired ones are really expensive. By the time you spent that money, you could buy a 2-rock, which will just be a lot better than all of it, really, I guess, for tone. But here's and another cool thing is it's switchable. So at this volume, you know, I've in this room, that's on 0.202 watts or something like that. That's on 3, and it's in my it's in one of the rooms in the house. It just sounds fab. I normally gig with it on 5 watts as well, people don't want it more than 5 watts. If I just double the volume now, in the room, that's on 1 watt, I think. And if I go up again, right, this is 5 watts. Okay, the next one is like 11. Alright, now my trousers are flapping, and then on the full shebang. So yeah, it's proper loud if you need it to be. You can also turn off the speaker, and if you do that, you've got your silent stage scenario that sort of, you know, wedding venues like. It's got vibrato, so if I use the vibrato, it's really nice. It's a really nice vibrato. It's got different speeds. The reverb goes on and on. That's on 7. And you know, I don't think anybody puts theirs on 10. Really, it's not the kind of thing where you, oh yeah, I'll put the reverb on 10. It's got a lot of reverb. And then, of course, you can do the thing that these are really good at, which is turn it up. Wow, I'm going to have to just attenuate this. And you can still do some of the tricks as well. So, like, you know, some people do some really cool stuff on YouTube with their deluxe reverbs. So that's with the volume, with the treble and bass off. You turn your bass all the way up. How good does that sound? So, you know, turn the bass all the way up. I'm only at 7. If I go up to 9, it's doing that thing that Marshalls do, you know, when the notes sort of double up. Of course, being a gentleman, I wouldn't do that live. I'd save that for my Marshall. But it does a lot more than you possibly think, really. That's better. So there it is. A really, you know, I've gone round the block with this, and you just can't, for me, you just can't beat the sound of an amplifier in a room. A couple of tips for this thing. I would recommend that you keep it on the floor, believe it or not. So a lot of people put them on stands and things like that. You get an extra bit of low end just by keeping this on the floor. I don't know if it's because it's got such a light cabinet, but yeah, keep it on the floor. If you want to crank it on, my favourite kind of sounds are just behind sort of breakup, so needs to be at like volume 3 to 4 for my preferences, especially because I use a lot of pedals on the front end. So if you're going to do that, you know, just attenuate the power at the back. The other cool thing is, whatever you use to attenuate the power, like whatever you do here, it actually doesn't affect the input going into the PA system. So if you're on stage at the venue and they're like, right, you need to turn that down because it's too loud, your sound engineer might say that. It doesn't happen to me very often, but when they do, I can just flick the attenuator rather than turning volumes down, and that way I keep the tone I want, and the sound engineer kind of can work around the rest of it with your in-ears or whatnot. So that's another bit of advice. I got it for about £800 in April. I bought it on my birthday actually, but I just really got into it. I was using a Helix, and I'd had a few situations where this. So I had in-ear monitors. I was using a Helix. I was doing these gigs, and they're all different gigs. And the sound engineers, a couple of them, would try to turn the vocals monitor mix down, and he turned mine down instead. And then I was just sat, like, you know, just stood there playing, not being able to hear a thing, because I couldn't actually hear what I was doing. I couldn't hear what the singers were doing. And I think the bass player was in a similar situation. The bass player just pulled one of his in-ears out, and he could hear his bass behind him because he had a little amp on stage. I thought, right, I should probably do that. So I was looking at FRFRs. FRFRs are cool, but in the context of using your guitar at home to practice with, it's a lot of setting up. I find that quite a bit of a faff. I just like to have an amp to plug in. Plus, it looks beautiful. It looks nice. What I did was I bought a Hot Rod Deluxe for £50 last January, and it was being sold for £50 because they thought the tubes needed replacing. I looked at it. One of the preamp tubes needed replacing, and I used it as a monitor. I just plugged my Helix into the input of the effects loop, so it used the power amp section, and that was great. It sounded really good. It sounded brilliant. It was just really heavy. And you know, when you're out gigging all the time, you know, I always like to have a spare of everything. I don't, you know, carrying extra valves around as well as everything else that I'm trying to do. Plus, it's all got to get, for me, the goal is it's one trip at the end of the night to do that many gigs. and I work full time, I need to make sure I've got all of this down so it's working. So there is that as well. So yeah, Deluxe Reverb, definitely one of those amps. It's a desert island amp for most people anyway. It's one of the most recorded amps, but for the applications that I use, it's just perfect. And I don't look for other amps really. I think the only thing that I'd like is like a Dumble type thing, like a 2-rock. But again, crazy money. I'm not going to spend that this side of my children being young. So anyway, please like and subscribe. It would be great to hear your opinions on this if you've got one of these. You know, I know some people worry about them breaking and getting replaced. I've done a lot of research on that, and a lot of people tend to just get a new one. If it breaks, you just take it back to the shop. What I tend to do as well, on my board I've got some amp inner boxes, and I've also got some IRs loaded into my Helix, so if it was really bad, I had a really bad situation, I could just flip to one of those. If my amp just decided not to ever work, I'd be able to get through a gig at least until I can get the or a couple of days until I can get it sorted. So always have a backup. But so far, great little amp.